So I finally got through the first 4 episodes of The Boys spinoff, Gen V. My history with The Boys is tumultuous at best. It's another in a long line of streaming shows that I love to hate and hate to watch. There's a theme with streaming services where they get great talent and actors, a big budget, and a really super interesting premise, and then just continue to shit the bed over and over. Network TV shows were always kind of plastic and predictable, but they had to be consistently good to keep the audience engaged because the individual show was responsible for advertising. Then Netflix came out and just started throwing money at everybody to make a movie. No time slots, no limited space for content. You promise people infinite content that they can burn through in a depression and ice cream filled weekend instead of an entire season. So you need to optimize the things you can control, which are big budgets, recognizable talent, and an interesting premise. In no way does quality writing or tight storytelling figure into that equation. So given that basically sums up my experience with The Boys, against my better judgment, I decided to try out Gen V. So let's get into it. The show follows Marie Moreau, who's a young superhero upstart whose parents gave her Compound V as a child in hopes of turning her into a superhero. She gets her powers, the ghastly ability to manipulate blood. What even are these powers? It's like telekinesis, but with this one specific bodily fluid. Is it stuff in the blood like the way Magneto can control iron? Is it other bodily tissue like skin and bone? No, just blood, huh? Oh, but it's other people's blood too, so that's kind of cool. Is it other bodily fluids? I don't think they've done a superhero who controls bodily fluid.
How about a little bit?
Fast forward, and Marie is in Godolkin University, which is an awkward name that the creators obviously strained themselves trying to select so they could refer to the university as God U, thus continuing the pretentious and overdone trope of comparing superheroes to gods. The goal of this university is to major in crime fighting and eventually snag a contract with the city. Essentially, they're training walking atom bombs to go to populated cities and fight in the streets at a regular ass, get hammered 7 nights a week college atmosphere where you decide if you want to be a dancer, a dental assistant, or a highly elite superhuman military enforcer. It feels like they were just really committed to the idea of superheroes at a college, so they kind of shoehorned everything on, like dress shoes on your grandfather's swollen feet. But anyways, Marie has a roommate, a likable and spunky but insecure shrinking woman named Emma, or Little Cricket. Marie ends up interacting with the top-ranked school superstars, who are all the preppy, spoiled, popular kids who have the keys to success handed to them. And she struggles to get accepted because even in college, they're ranking superheroes entirely on how viable their powers are to sell to middle America. One of the characters actually made a crack like it was a dirty superpower and she probably has Hep C. I laughed at that. I feel like there's a lot of material there, but I don't know how far they're going to go with blood diseases before they start triggering people. Now, I have to point out that from my perspective, college coming of age stories get more insufferable as I get older. It just gets depicted as a cruise ship orgy for rich teenagers. Like, thank God you got this break from your first world existence as a dependent of your upper middle class parents. Like, if you actually just got out of college, you're probably thinking, wow, binging on drugs, alcohol, and reckless sex while going 6 figures in debt to get a really minimal amount of education. There's probably a better way to do this. This system needs revising. It feels like adult writers who still try to sensationalize the college experience either regret not having it themselves or still find teenagers engaging in sex and drugs titillating. Either way, it's kind of weird. Old man rant over. Or is it? So the show starts out with a really tragic event that happens when she gets her powers for the first time, which coincides with her first period. So she becomes a woman and then immediately rains horror down on everyone. It's the most honest thing about this show. But it was a moving scene. It was really well done. It connected you to her motivation, and you kind of carry that throughout the show. Now, the show also has the features of The Boys that I like, which is the creative and graphic violence, and I am a certified sucker for over-the-top gonzo horror visuals. There's some interesting dynamics that have really big potential with the plot, and I gotta say, it actually is a talented and likable cast. So what keeps this show from really being a slam dunk for me, aside from the train wreck I see coming down the tracks, which is the inevitable directionless plot when the writers forget what to do with these characters, it really is the retreading of the same overcooked social commentary and corporate satire that I was choking on by season 3 of The Boys. Now, the show is obviously created as commentary first and storytelling second, and it sticks in your teeth like last week's beef jerky. Like, let's start with the teen mental health. You have Jordan, whose superpower is being strong and invulnerable and is able to take bullets, but also changes gender sporadically for some reason, and thusly has to deal with the trans stigma. Then you get Cricket's superpowers, which is that she can shrink or also get really big, like Ant-Man. except she has to eat to get big and she has to vomit to get small, which makes her superpower bulimia. And it's also kind of convenient given that her mom comes on the scene and literally gave her an eating disorder by teaching her how to throw up. I mean, why would those two things happen together except as a forced plot contrivance? And then you have Marie, who can control blood, which requires cutting herself to make use of. I mean, we find out she can manipulate blood in other people's bodies and make things explode, but she still goes the self-harm route because for some reason she prefers her wimpy blood tentacles that aren't as powerful that also drain her precious life force. And really it's because the writers want you to see her cut herself. Now these kids are all at the most privileged institution in the world and they have the powers of gods and they have a bright future in front of them. But the show still tries to hit you with the same, everyone just wants too much from me emo crap that has to get shoehorned in on like any teenager college level coming of age story. And it really is made more aggravating by the fact that they were written with superpowers that aren't metaphors for, but are actually literal representations of teen angst. Like it's really on the nose. If they made this in a middle school show, they would have to write superpowers for getting boners in class or pissing your pants on a field trip. Now, the humor of the boys' verse in the original show and here is really hit and miss. This type of humor used to be classified as irreverent, meaning I have no special reverence for sacred cows. Now watch me slaughter them in front of you. But politically and socially motivated jokes are definitionally reverent, just towards one particular side. It works better when everyone is fair game, but like half of these jokes are really ham-fisted digs to the other side, and it hits the ear wrong to anybody who isn't a card-carrying member of the writer's specific ideological group. So in writing this, I do realize that I sound like a cranky conservative, so let's take a few big steps back. I don't think that any art form should be neutral or free from the biases of the artist. One, you really can't do that anyways, and two, if you try, the art gets really soulless and stale. The point of experiencing somebody else's art should not be to get your own truths repeated back to you. But with comedy, there is a really big difference between making somebody laugh because you gave them some universal truth in a clever and surprising way, and making somebody laugh because you just validated their bullshit back to them. It's fine to laugh for that reason, but that's not humor or comedy. And if that validation takes priority over your actual mastery of the medium that you're using to present it, it's actually going to kill the punchline. And it's the same with any visual art, music, stand-up comedy, and storytelling. The medium is the point. It's the way you engage with the audience. It's the way you give them an experience. It's the reason that they listen to you in the first place. So even if you have a really important message that you're like super morally obligated to go preach to other people, putting the message second to the craft is still the only way to get people to hear it. If the message itself takes precedent, it's just preaching to the choir. It's for people that were bought in already. It's a corny after school special. It's a bus stop PSA telling you not to do a domestic violence. It's a bad Kirk Cameron Christian movie. For example, in the opening of the first episode, they resurrect Elizabeth Shue specifically so they could have a 7-second clip of her being a tone-deaf white woman talking about living in a post-racial society. I don't think I heard the term post-racial since before Obama was president. Then you have a contemporary Draco Malfoy wearing a bright red hat. He says something mean, of course, so his punishment is to be brainwashed into hitting himself in the balls every hour with a baseball bat. Now, making fun of any one of these people isn't the problem. These types of people exist. They are easy targets and they are certainly fair game. It's that the forced and repetitive gags make the writing group come off like the modern day underburdened white liberals who sit around and touch themselves at the thought of fighting uniformed Nazi soldiers from World War II. And these are the type of people that generally don't have the wherewithal to fight a cold. It's not even the meanness of the jokes. A well-crafted mean joke can put a sour taste in your mouth for hours. It's like the residue from a nicely aged scotch. If you don't have a taste for it, it's not because it's bad, it's because you have peasant sensibilities. No, mean jokes are fine. The problem is that coming back to the same well over and over makes that blue label taste like plastic bottle, regardless of the content. I'm trying to think of a situation where I would be super excited to see a fictional show where my ideological adversaries are humiliated throughout. It would have to be some first world socialist fashionista who stutters through surface level commentary like a high school junior trying to take an oral exam that he didn't study for, who spends his time criticizing the system he got rich off of by regurgitating the opinions of others, and who continues to hoard wealth while shoulder shrugging and saying, "What am I supposed to do?" when people point out that they have millions of dollars that they aren't doing anything with. Wow, that backfired. Yeah, somebody make that movie. I'd love to see that. But seriously, even then, by the third gag, I would start to wonder if the people writing it were okay. And by the fifth season, I'd be suggesting an intervention and some grass touching. On the note of overplaying a gag, the humor is like super dick oriented, like to the point where it's weird, which seems like an exceptional feat to pull off when your entire brand is filthy humor. Like any one of these gags would have been really funny as a standalone, but all of them together makes you super aware that there is supposed to be a lot of dick humor and that you're supposed to take note of it. It makes you stop and ask, what's my takeaway supposed to be with all these dicks being abused? Like, if you ever watched The Boys and thought, wow, they love showing penises. They love making jokes about penises. They love mutilating penises. Yep, they sure do, and they love it in this show too. You have Trumper Malfoy, who is doomed to hit himself in the balls every hour for making a bad joke. You have Cricket, who's shrunken down, wrapped around the erect dick of a guy she's sleeping with while she kicks his balls below her. You have the Human Torch knockoff, Golden Boy, who has his fiery dick punched in slow motion. You have a girl whose power is simply having a giant rat tail being made to fillet it on camera. You have a security guard who is brainwashed into deep-throating and then anally inserting a flashlight. You have the Invisible Man R.A., who gives announcements with his dick out. You have a psychic date rapist having his dick explode from Marie's blood-exploding powers. And you have this pretty good, investigative character named Tech Knight until he gets nerfed with the Taika Waititi treatment 5 minutes later because he gets blackmailed. And apparently he has a brain tumor that makes him stick his dick in anything that looks like a hole. So then you have to see the random reel of him fucking random objects. So the show is literally ouch my balls for mediocrity. Now, it's obviously some weirdo activism to balance the scales of decades of women being objectified on camera. So if you wonder if you should feel weird about the huge amount of time that goes into referencing and mutilating male genitalia, no, you shouldn't. It's important social commentary and you just don't get it. And don't bother complaining because the show just obviously isn't for you. There's also the really tired punchline of soulless corporate people are soulless. Succession, this is not. There is a shallowness to every single supporting character who pops in and out because of the way they exist, only to set up that punchline. Corporate person mentions ratings during a tragedy. Phony television personality is phony. Repeat that every 9 minutes for as long as the show is on. It's like The Office, where there's Jim and Pam staring knowingly into the camera, and literally everybody else is a comedic tool that has to be oblivious to their own ridiculousness to make the gag work. That's what makes this show hard to stomach, and it's probably why I'm going to fall off the same way I did with The Boys. I will say, though, there is a strong premise, and there is something that looks like character development going on. Despite the poor privileged college kid angle, I do find myself enjoying the characters interact, and I actually want to know more about some of them. Cricket is like a really endearing character, and she has some issues, but she seems intact as somebody who can do good without wallowing in victimhood. She's kind of spunky, and you're eager to see where her character goes. If you read to me the premise for Marie and Jordan's interactions before watching the show, I would have probably retched. But it works. I don't know if it's the writing, I don't know if it's the talent and the charisma of the actors, but I'm staying tuned to see how it plays out. The characters are getting a bit more depth as the show goes on, more than any of the wooden props that made up the 7 after 4 seasons of The Boys. And now we just have to hope that they stay internally consistent and actually are given an arc to follow through on. Now, I don't want to get expectations high, lest I jinx it, but for now, I'm in. So if filthy humor and constant dick punching, along with sexually charged teenage drama, is enough to keep you going, like it probably is for most of you, this is probably going to be a worthwhile watch. Most of you probably are not going to have my bugaboos, so enjoy the blood and the swearing. But in 2 seasons, when the writers forget what to do with these characters, when you don't really have anyone to root for, and it just turns into one meaningless X-rated shenanigan after another, remember, you heard it here first. So that's all I got today. Let me know what you thought of the show. Do you agree with me? Do you see some of my points, or do you think I'm dead wrong? Tell me why in the comments. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.